svake noći. Nema vas, nema vas, nema vas, tražim vas, tražim vas, tražim vas. Gdje god krene vidim vas. Majko,
Majko,
Oče, što vas nema. Bosno moja, ti si moja mati. Bosno moja, majkom ću te zvati. Bosno majko, Srebrenice sestro, neću biti sam.
Bosno moja, ti si moja mati. Bosno moja, majkom ću te zvati. Bosno majko, Srebrenice sestro, neću biti sam. Planetosu, planetosu,
Sestro,
sestro,
brate, još vas sanjam svake noći. Nema vas, nema vas, nema vas, tražim vas, tražim vas, tražim vas. Gdje god krene vidim vas. Majko,
Majko,
Oče,
Oče,
što vas nema. Bosno moja, ti si moja mati. Bosno moja, majkom ću te zvati. Bosno majko, Srebrenice sestro, neću biti sam.
Bosno moja, ti si moja mati. Bosno moja, majkom ću te zvati. Bosno majko, Srebrenice sestro, neću biti sam. Planetosu, 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 planetosu,
Your Excellencies, dear esteemed members of Danish government, dear honorary guests and Bosnian citizens. Good afternoon and thank you all for being here. You have just witnessed a powerful tribute to the victims of the Srebrenica genocide, a musical composition, a requiem called Srebrenica Inferno. Through the verses of this poem, the piece expresses the pain of a child who lost their parents, siblings, and loved ones during the genocide, as was the fate of many children in what was supposed to be a UN-protected zone. We have gathered today to honor and remember more than 8,300 Bosniak men and boys who were systematically executed in Srebrenica, which had been designated a safe area by a Security Council resolution. Today, we mark 30 years since the genocide in Srebrenica. It remains the worst atrocity committed on European soil since the Second World War. It stands as one of the darkest chapters in human history, a stark reminder of the devastating consequences of hatred, dehumanization, and silence. This commemoration is more than an act of remembrance. It is a collective stand for truth, justice, and human dignity. And as we reflect on the pain and loss carried by families and survivors, pain that is and will be felt by generations to come, we also reaffirm our responsibility to speak the truth, to confront denial, and to ensure that such horror is never repeated. And together in memory and in solidarity we say, never again. I would like to acknowledge the organizers of today's event, the Embassy of Bosnia and Herzegovina in Copenhagen, Riyasat of Islamic Community in Bosnia and Herzegovina, Islamic Community of Bosniaks in Denmark, Bosnian Cultural Center in Copenhagen, and Bosnian and Herzegovinian Association in Copenhagen. In the opening part of today's commemoration, we will hear from our ambassador, Her Excellency Ms. Anesa Kundurović-Miljak, followed by the State Secretary for Foreign Policy at the Danish Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ms. Lotte Makon. We will hear from Mr. Mohamed Yusic, Director of the Department for Foreign Affairs and Diaspora at Riyasat of Islamic Community in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and we will also have a chance to see a video, a testimony on the Srebrenica genocide by Imam from Srebrenica, Ahmed Krustanović. The second part of the program is dedicated to a panel discussion featuring 4 distinguished guests: Mr. Anas Levinson, former head of UNHCR office in Tuzla; Professor Emeritus Frederick Harhoff, a former judge at the International Criminal Tribunal for former Yugoslavia; Dr. Hikmet Karčić, a leading scholar in genocide and memory studies; and Mr. Čamil Duraković, a genocide survivor and a witness, a vice president of the Republika Srpska entity. Now I would like to call the Ambassador of Bosnia and Herzegovina in Denmark, Her Excellency Ms. Anesa Kundurović-Miljak, to address us.
Dear colleagues, Your Excellencies, thank you so much for joining us here today. This is a very, very special event for us. We've been on the road for 3 days. We were in Randers on Saturday, we were in Esbjerg yesterday, and today we are here in Copenhagen. The Bosniaks community in Denmark, together with the Islamic community of Bosnia and Herzegovina and Riyasat, has organized several different manifestations. This one is organized today together with the embassy, and I feel it my honor and my duty and my obligation to present to you some of the facts that I'm sure you all very well know and are aware of, that these things are very important to talk about and to remind ourselves of the things that happened in order to avoid them from ever repeating themselves ever again, anywhere again. Today we stand together in memory and mourning as we mark 30 years since the genocide in Srebrenica, a place that once echoed with laughter and life and now stands as a solemn reminder of the darkest days in our history. 11th of July 1995, more than 8,372 Bosniak men and boys, as young as 14 and 15 years old, were systematically murdered. Not because of anything they had done, but simply because of who they were. They were sons of this land, of Bosnian land, people of faith, of tradition, and of community. People who believed in a life of dignity, family, and peace, and who were robbed of that by hatred and the failure of the world to protect them. This crime did not happen in some far-off time or place. It happened in the heart of Europe, in our Bosnia and Herzegovina, a land that has always been a crossroad of cultures, religions, civilizations, and people. A land where diversity was once our greatest strength and where it must become our strength again. We remember every lost life, every name carved into the white stones at the memorial Kopenhagen, which you had a chance to see at the video just before. We remember the mothers of Srebrenica, the pillars of dignity and truth, who turned grief into a lifelong struggle for justice. As one of the mothers Munira Subasic, a mother who lost her son and husband, once said, and I quote, "We do not seek revenge, we seek truth, we seek justice, and we seek peace for all of Bosnia." End of quote. Her words are a reflection of the Bosnian spirit, which is proud, wounded, but unbroken. This year, as we commemorate this painful anniversary, we are also reminded of a historic moment on the global stage. Last year, on the 23rd of May, the United Nations General Assembly adopted a resolution that has officially recognized July 11th as the International Day of Reflection and remembrance of the 1995 Srebrenica genocide. This resolution is not only a powerful acknowledgement of truth, it is a stand against genocide denial and a step toward lasting peace and reconciliation. It sends a message to the world that the victims of Srebrenica will not be forgotten and that truth and memory must stand stronger than denial and revisionism. It is a recognition that what happened in Srebrenica was not just a tragedy for Bosnia and Herzegovina, but a crime against humanity that concerns everyone. Our responsibility today is not only to remember, but to act, to ensure that denial is never allowed, to rewrite the truth, that nationalism and hatred are never allowed to poison the future of our children, that the memory of Srebrenica becomes not only a symbol of tragedy, but a foundation for peace. Let us draw strength from our traditions of Bosnia, from the azan that still echoes in the valleys, from the stečci that reminds us of our shared past, and from the strength of our people who have endured pain but have never surrendered their humanity. As we reflect on the tragedy of Srebrenica, let us also remember that the fight for justice continues in many other pieces and places on the planet. I must not forget to mention that the people of Gaza too are enduring unspeakable suffering, that the international community's silence in the face of current atrocities is a reminder that we must not let genocide and violence ever happen again, no matter the place or the people. We must teach the next generation what happened in Srebrenica, and we must teach them that never again is not just a phrase, it is a promise, it is a moral obligation. May the souls of those who were taken in Srebrenica rest in eternal peace. May we never forget their names. And may Bosnia and Herzegovina rise from remembrance, not with bitterness, but with the hope of a future where no child grows up in fear and no community lives in silence. Da se nikad nikome i nigdje ne ponovi Srebrenica. May it never happen again to anyone. Hvala.
Thank you, Your Excellency. We are honored to welcome Ms. Lotte Macon, State Secretary for Foreign Policy at the Danish Ministry of Foreign Affairs, who will address us now.
Excellencies, Minister, Ambassadors, colleagues, members of the Bosnian community in Denmark, dear participants. It is indeed an honor to be here today and be able to address you. Today, as is evidently clear, we are marking the 30 years since a tragedy, a senseless tragedy, unfolded in Europe. A tragedy we believed would never happen again after the horrors of the Second World War. But yet, it did. In July 1995, the world saw once more the depths of cruelty and brutality, of hatred and intolerance that humans can unleash. I'm here today to pay tribute to the victims and the survivors of the Srebrenica genocide, where more than 8,000 Bosniak men and women, men and boys were systematically murdered over the course of only 72 hours, beginning in the afternoon of the 13th of July. They were sons, brothers, and friends, lives full of promises and hope, but it was cut brutally short. The pain, the real pain of Srebrenica, is not confined to the past, it echoes here in the present. We as in the international community, we have a shared responsibility to preserve the memory of these atrocities, to ensure that we this time learn to avoid such horror to repeat themselves once again. But memory alone is not enough. The 30 years anniversary of Srebrenica must be more than a moment of remembrance and mourning. It must be a call to action, a time to promote reconciliation, to confront denial and silence, and to reaffirm our collective commitment to truth and justice. Justice for the victims is not only about holding perpetrators accountable, it is also about building a society where such crimes become absolutely unimaginable. Denmark stands with the people of Bosnia and Herzegovina as they work to build a peaceful, stable, and prosperous society. We recognize the courage of those who strive for reconciliation, who seek to heal the wounds of the past, and who look forward towards a future defined not by division, but by unity and hope. Let me here mention and recognize the important work done by the Srebrenica Memorial Center. Because the future is here for Bosnia and Herzegovina to claim. This year, 2025, also marks the 30 years since the signing of the Dayton Peace Agreement that ended the horrific war and laid the foundation for peace, for stability, and for progress. And as we remember Srebrenica, let us also seize the Dayton anniversary as an opportunity to accelerate such progress. Yet, in recent months, we have seen a significant rise in tensions and the unfolding of a political and constitutional crisis. There should be no doubt that Denmark, the government of Denmark, is deeply concerned by these developments. All actors must ensure full compliance with the Dayton Peace Agreement and its implementation, and ensure the respect for the independence of the judiciary. Denmark remains steadfast in our commitment to Bosnia and Herzegovina's sovereignty, territorial integrity, as a single and united country with its multi-ethnic character. It is time to focus on what unites and what benefits all citizens. One such thing is the aspiration for the European Union, for joining the Union, an aspiration shared by all parties in Bosnia and Herzegovina. As Denmark soon takes over the presidency of the Council of the European Union, Denmark too is committed to this path. Therefore, we encourage leaders to step up for the pace of reforms and make use of the opportunity granted by the March 24 decision to open EU accession negotiations once the conditions have been met. When Bosnia reaches out for its future, the more than 8,000 men and boys of Srebrenica, their memory will be here. It will not be in vain. It will be also a living coal that shapes a better tomorrow. Let us ensure that from the darkness of Srebrenica, a brighter, a united, and much more peaceful and stable future will arise. Thank you very much.
I would like to thank the State Secretary for being with us today. Our next speaker is Mr. Mohamed Jusic, Director of the Department for Foreign Affairs and Diaspora at the Riyasat of Islamic Community in Bosnia and Herzegovina. He's a former ambassador to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, Sultanate Oman and Republic of Yemen, and permanent representative of Bosnia and Herzegovina at the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. He's also a Bosnian analyst on Islam, the Balkans, and the Middle East. Welcome.
Your Excellencies, Your Eminences, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, let me thank you for being here. Second, let me convey greetings and salams from His Eminence Reisul Ulema, Grand Mufti of Bosnia and Herzegovina, who specifically told me to thank Denmark for your support. We feel your presence, your efforts to help Bosnia recover, and also to keep the truth about what happened there alive, so it becomes basis for a better future for all the nations in Balkans, and especially in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being voiceless or voiceless. The people who perished in genocide in Srebrenica didn't have a chance to say their story, didn't have a chance to explain how they feel, what they thought in the last moments of their lives. But we are here to carry that message, and we want to tell you thank you for that. Other than that, as our ambassador mentioned here, the 30th anniversary and the first anniversary after the resolution of the General Assembly is very important for us. So, with all the ambassadors here from countries who also supported this resolution, from United Kingdom, Germany, not to mention all of you who I just met in the corridor, we want, as representatives of victims, to ask you that you help this resolution become part of our educational systems in Europe and around the world. Please don't let that resolution become just one more unachieved UN resolution on Srebrenica and genocide. It will be one more failure of us as an international community. There's a lot that we can do together. We brought you our experts, we brought you the exhibition, we have a memorial center in Srebrenica, people who are very keen and very professional in bringing lessons of Srebrenica to the world. Again, even the exhibitions that we brought from Sarajevo, and now it is here, and he will talk about it, our friend Iker, is focusing on lessons. We see it, as Secretary said, that if we learn something from the victims of genocide in Srebrenica, that those victims will not be in vain. The humanity will benefit. After Shoah, after Holocaust on Jews and Roma in Second World War, we said never again. And then after Srebrenica, we said never again. And now, things are happening in the world from Ukraine to Gaza that we have to make sure that lessons of Srebrenica are learned. They can be learned only if we educate our youth, not to revenge, not to politicize events, but just to take lessons for the future so nothing like that happens again. If we don't do that, we will keep repeating the same mistakes, and we are, with our very painful experience, willing to share that with the world. Again, thank you once again for hosting us here. I want to thank our Mufti from Croatia, Mufti of Bosnia and Herzegovina, our ambassador and her team, who did everything, our chief imam here and his staff for organizing this. We are very encouraged in Bosnia when we see that there are people who are not only mothers of Srebrenica, as you see in these pictures, sitting next to the graves of their fathers and sons and relatives, but the world was standing behind them and trying to make sense of that terrible, terrible evil that happened not far away from our borders. Thank you so much, and you are always welcome in Bosnia and always welcome in Srebrenica. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Jusic. As part of today's commemoration, we will now watch a short video testimony, a deeply personal reflection that bears witness to the human cost of genocide and the enduring strength of those who survived. Ahmed Hrustanovic is the Imam of the White Mosque in Srebrenica and a survivor of Srebrenica genocide. After completing his studies at the Faculty of Islamic Studies in Sarajevo, he returned to his hometown, where he has served as an Imam since 2014. His work is dedicated to remembrance, community resilience, and the fight against...
From Srebrenica to all of you there in Kopenhagen. My name is Ahmed Hrustanovic. I was born in Srebrenica in 1986. In March 1993, we had to move from my village to Srebrenica because Yugoslav National Army helped with the local Serb army attack my village and try to kill us all. I stayed in Srebrenica around 1 month then, when the big massacre in schoolyard happened, my father started to think to move us to Tuzla, because it was we were able to travel through not to travel, we were able to be moved from Srebrenica to Tuzla by United Nations trucks, because United Nations bring some food to us, because it was really hard moments there, in difficult moments in Srebrenica, without food, without medicine, without everything. He sent us every day one letter from Srebrenica, because he stayed in Srebrenica with other male family members. All of them were stayed in Srebrenica, and me and my mom and my sister, we moved to Tuzla. When July 1995 happened, and the Serb army, together with Yugoslav National Army, entered the Srebrenica, my father tried to reach Tuzla through the woods of Podrinje, and he was captured close to the Serb village of Kravica, and he was killed with his 2 brothers together in the warehouse in Kravica with 1,300 more Bosniaks there.
What did you think was going to happen to the men captured along the Konjević Polje Bratunac road on the 13th?
Nisam ja ništa mislio, ja sam, gospodine tužioče, znao šta će biti sa njima. Znao sam da će ti ljudi biti zarobljeni i nakon toga pobijeni. Ja sam to znao.
We didn't see anyone else of our family members after the July 1995. All of them were killed, including my father, my 2 grandfathers, and my 4 uncles. All of them were buried in Memorial Center in Srebrenica right now. And it's not that just they are buried, we are burying them every year, because their bones are not collected together, all of them. In 2021, we had to redig the grave of my father, because more than 50% of his bones were missing. So in 2021, we collect together those bones, and again we had funeral, again we had to bury him, and again we had to going through those hard emotions and difficult emotions to all of us. And those second this second funeral was the most difficult thing that happened me in my life. After my graduation in Sarajevo on Faculty of Islamic Studies, I realized that I missed something. Then I decided to move back to start a new life in Srebrenica with my family. I get married and I get 5 kids with my lovely wife there in Srebrenica. Many people ask me why did I go back to live in Srebrenica again, because everything I had to go through. It was the best decision in my life that I made it, that I tried to, and I'm trying to help my community to talk about genocide, to talk about Srebrenica. There is in Srebrenica so many stories that had to be spoken about it. World and people around the world had to know those stories, because we have to speak about truth, we have to speak about justice. We had to speak about Srebrenica everywhere. Many people doesn't know how much is important to us to speak about Srebrenica, how much is important to us this United Nations resolution that happened a year ago. That's something that really important to us as a victims of genocide. We now can freely speak about what we survived. I want to invite you all of you to come to Srebrenica, to visit our city, to visit us there, because there is still life in Srebrenica. We live there. There is there is children in Srebrenica. So many of them are there, going to school, living their lives, laughing there in the Srebrenica streets, and life is winning there. But we have to fight together. We have to fight together against denial, against other narratives besides genocide. You are always welcome in Srebrenica. I will welcome you there with pleasure.
As we mark 30 years since the genocide in Srebrenica, we not only remember the victims and mourn the unimaginable loss, we also reflect on the lessons we have yet to fully learn. The next part of our program is dedicated to a panel discussion titled From Remembrance to Responsibility, 30 years after the genocide in Srebrenica. With this discussion, we aim to look beyond memory and into action. What does responsibility mean today for individuals, for institutions, and for societies? How do we confront denial, strengthen justice, and protect truth in a time when historical facts are too often questioned or ignored? Our panelists bring different perspectives, reflecting an interdisciplinary approach to one of the most painful and complex topics of our shared history. Discussion will be structured into 4 segments. The first segment, we will hear from Mr. Anders Levinson, former head of UNHCR office in Tuzla. He will share his insights on the events leading up to the fall of Srebrenica, the role of UNHCR, and the failure of the UN and the international community during that time. The second segment will focus on the legal framework and international justice, the role of international law in prosecuting the genocide in Srebrenica and establishing historical truth. We are honored to welcome Professor of International Law and International Humanitarian Law at the University of Southern Denmark, Professor Emeritus Fredrik Harhoff, who also served as an editing judge at the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia. The third segment, on culture of memory, resistance to forgetting, and the struggle for truth from within, will explore the ongoing challenges of preserving memory, resisting denial, and defending truth, both publicly and within institutions. We are joined by Dr. Hikmet Karcic, genocide scholar based in Sarajevo. Dr. Karcic is a research associate at the Institute for Research of Crimes Against Humanity and International Law at the University of Sarajevo. In the final segment, we will reflect on the importance of the adopted UN resolution on the Srebrenica genocide and the message it sends to the future generations to never forget. Joining this part of the discussion is Mr. Chamil Durakovic, a survivor and witness of the Srebrenica genocide. He's a vice president of the Republika Srpska entity who has spent the past decade being actively engaged in political and institutional efforts to defend the rights of returnees. After we hear from our panelists, we'll open the discussion to the audience for a Q&A session where you'll have the opportunity to ask your own questions and engage with our speakers. So please join me in welcoming our distinguished guests. Mr. Levinson, we start with you. Thank you for being with us today. Could you share your insights with us on the events leading up to the fall of Srebrenica, the role of UNHCR at the time, and your reflection on the failure of the UN and the international community?
Thank you so much. And I hope you can hear me. Dear Excellencies, dear guests and friends, ambassadors, thank you for inviting me. I'm a little bit nervous today because it's going to be very difficult for me. Speech. After 30 years, I have refrained from telling my full story about Srebrenica. Partly because it always hurts, and partly because I fear it will undermine my efforts to build bridges between the warring groups in the Balkans. But today I have finally come to share my passion. When people recount the genocide of Srebrenica, most begin either in April 93, when General Morillon forced his way into the enclave, pushing a Serb commander at the bridge in Srebrenica to force his way, or with the haunting images we just saw 2 years after, later when the men being separated from their families in the schoolyard and executed in the Somalia, while the Dutch UNPROFOR soldiers stood by. But my story starts earlier, when the ideals of UN collided with the political realities of the war, and decisions about life and death became entangled in a diplomatic fog. At the time I was head of UNHCR in Central and Northeast Bosnia, I set up and was leading the operation at a time when the operation grew from nothing, from zero to distribution of emergency to 780,000 people monthly. Besides providing relief, we were also tasked with protecting minorities in the areas under threat from ethnic cleansing. In this role, I sat at negotiation tables, helping broker local ceasefires, and led, among others, efforts like the peace agreement in October '92 between the Bosnian Croats and Bosnian Muslims in central Bosnia, a ceasefire or peace agreement that later led to the Kosovo Committee. By early '93, Srebrenica was under siege. The enclave was cut off, and the Serb forces, who viewed it as a strategic and symbolic target, had tightened their grip. Allegations of abuses on the main road to eastern Bosnia and atrocities around Bratunac by the Bosnian forces under the lead of Nasser Oric gave Serbs a justification for the blockade. Our efforts to send emergency aid via packed animals or on the cover of night were failing. The situation has become unbearable. To pressure the UN, the Tuzla authorities halted all cooperation with us until we had delivered aid to Srebrenica. Hence, I relocated myself to Tuzla to unblock the blockade, and during that period, I suddenly found myself in a very tense meeting with the senior leadership of the Tuzla Finger, including the mayor, Srebrenica Beslagic, Jasmin Imanovic, the Sead Abdic, the commander of the airport, the commander of the Serb force, and a special envoy sent out from Izetbegovic called Munja. They proposed me a very desperate plan. UNHCR should supply medicine and baby food, which the army would fly into the enclave using the last 2 worn-out helicopters. In return, they would evacuate the wounded and injured. I responded, what you are asking me to do is to evacuate the entire enclave. There was silence. Everyone in the meeting, except Beslagic, shed a tear. In that moment, we agreed to evacuate. Actually, the situation was so desperate that even President Izetbegovic gave his support to the evacuation. Thus, as a press briefing in New York, he was quoted as saying, sometimes the situation becomes so serious that evacuation is the only solution. That is where we are now. Under the lead of the Tuzla authorities and supported by all international emergency agencies in the area, we developed a large-scale plan. Refugees would be received in Tuzla and surrounding areas. The city architects had transformed the Maidan Sports Center into a reception site. And when the refugees started moving, Zehra and I was together at the Maidan monitoring the situation closely with incoming reports from ECMM, the radio amateurs in Srebrenica, and some international journalists who have their own sources. The estimation was that 30 to 40,000 people were on the run. But when the refugee convoy reached Kopenhagen, it was suddenly stopped against all agreements. Then came the shelling. 14 were killed, many more injured, and the shelling forced the refugees to turn back to Srebrenica. The British Major Abraham later described the horror, including how a Serb arm landed on the front of his warrior. However, just hours earlier, the French General Morillon had left the official UN reconnaissance team that had encountered the refugees. He had chosen to go his own way, reportedly to meet with the Bosnian Serb commander near Srebrenica. Of course, I don't know what they have said during that meeting, but I have long harbored a suspicion that this particular meeting marked a turning point. And I find it difficult to understand why no historian or journalist have yet investigated this further. General Morgan, prior to the humanitarian corridor, expressed his view that evacuation was not a humanitarian act, but rather a political one, which could be seen as aiding the ethnic cleansing. This position he also repeated when he met the press following the meeting in Srebrenica, when he was quoted for the infamous quote, "I have never seen any sign of massacre," he said, because as a soldier he could not smell death. I do not believe that General Morillon explicitly sanctioned the halting of the refugees, let alone their shelling. But I do wonder what was a silent understanding, was a message sent or left unsent that allowed the Bosnian Serb to act without fear of consequences? Or did he simply ask the commander to help free his refugees from the panicked crowd? What I have come to suspect is that the situation in Kopenhagen evolved into a kind of double deadlock. First, the refugees were sheltered by the Bosnian Serbs, then the UN refugee team arrived, only to become trapped themselves, surrounded by desperate refugees on the run, who refused to move without the protection of the UN. The soldiers could not advance, and the civilians not retreat. A standoff within a standoff, and paralysis within paralysis. Perhaps Morillon's concern in that moment was not the broader mission, but the immediate safety of his own men, UN personnel corps, in a volatile situation, immobilized and unable to act. Perhaps he negotiated safe passage. Perhaps he pleaded for the dispersal of the crowd. Perhaps. What I do know, however, is that this statement to the press that he had seen no sign of massacre reinforced a political logic that stalled the humanitarian corridor. But later, when he entered Srebrenica himself, he was physically prevented from leaving by a desperate and furious population until aid was delivered. His perspective changed. But by then, the damage had already been done. In the days that followed, the UN abandoned the plan of the humanitarian corridor. Instead, Security Council declared the enclave a safe area and sent UNPROFOR troops with a mandate to protect civilians. The political logic had prevailed over the humanitarian one. A new integrated UN operation was created, placing political, military and humanitarian agencies under joint senior leadership, first Kofi Annan, then Thorvald Stoltenberg, and then Akashi, etc. The mission changed character. I remember an evening in Split. We were en route to Zagreb after having accompanying Security Council delegates on a field trip. Sitting in a hotel room, we watched the CNN announce the safe zones decision. One of my colleagues turned to me and said, "Congratulations, Anders, your effort paid off." But before I could answer, Jose Maria Mendeluce, the UNHCR Special Envoy, cut in. "No," he said, "you lost. They have just created the biggest UN-protected detention camp in Europe since the Second World War." His words struck me hard, and I still do. They expose the paradox by refusing to evacuate civilians and locking them inside besieged air enclaves. We may have turned protection into imprisonment. Our neutrality became complicity. The people we try to protect were taken hostage by our own inaction. And that's where the difficult question arises. Who gets to decide what is humanitarian and what is political? Was it I, backed by Madame Ogata, who insisted on evacuation to save lives? Or was it Morillon, who initially feared that it would facilitate ethnic cleansing? If Morillon's understanding prevailed, and it did, then part of the responsibility lies with me. I pressed forward, and I believed, and if my actions were misunderstood, ignored, misinterpreted, then I must also accept my share of the responsibility. To put it plainly, Srebrenica was betrayed not only by its enemies, but also by those who could not agree on how to protect the people. When I look at Gaza today, I feel the same paralysis. Again, the UN is divided. Again, we debate whether evacuation protects or displaces. Again, that we debate that debate becomes a pretext for inaction. There are moments when moral and humanitarian imperatives must overweigh political calculations. 93 was such a moment, 25 is another. If we truly want to honor the victims of Srebrenica, we must then learn not only from the massacre, but from the missed opportunities that preceded it, from those who tried to act and were stopped not by the enemy, but their own colleagues.
Now we move on to our second panelist, the former judge at the International Criminal Tribunal. Yes, of course. Then I will stand to ask a question too. So looking back at the work of the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, particularly in cases related to Srebrenica, what do you see as the most significant achievements of the court itself and its rulings, and what do you believe remains unfinished?
Thank you for your question, and thank you for the introduction and for being invited here. I'm very proud and grateful that I can perhaps and hopefully contribute with some of the facts that we've been looking for. And thanks to Director Leeson for a very emotional and genuine speech that really struck me very hard. It must have been helpful. In any case, genocide is a term that is often misunderstood. And when we sat as judges in the ICTY, the Yugoslav Tribunal, and also worked with the Rwanda Tribunal, we struggled hard to find the definition of genocide, because the Genocide Convention reads that genocide is with the intent to destroy in whole and part an ethnical, national, racial, or religious group as such. But that doesn't say very much. What does it mean to destroy a group or as such? We really worked for months discussing what could be a proper definition of genocide. And when we asked around, most people we asked said, well, genocide is about killing a lot of people. Sorry, that is not correct. In fact, you can commit genocide without killing anyone. You can commit genocide without curbing a hair on anyone's head. Genocide is not just about the killing of a lot of people. And this is where genocide is different from the other war crimes that we're speaking about, such as ethnic cleansing or attack against civilians and so on. Because genocide has a room of its own. It's actually called the mother of all crimes because it's a crime that is so heinous and cruel that it has a separate place in the hierarchy of crimes. And I'll tell you why. The definition we ended up finding in Rwanda and in Yugoslavia, as judges, is this. genocide is the intent to deny a group, ethnic, national, racial, or religious group, the right to exist as a group. That is genocide. It's not about killing. Well, killing can be part of it, but it is not genocide unless you do the killings or whatever it is you do with the intent to deny the group the right to exist as a group. I mean, just think about it. Who would have the right to decide which groups are allowed to be here? I mean, come on. If we ask that question, we would say, well, Allah or God or Yahweh or whoever is upstairs, you know, they can take those kind of positions, but we mortal human beings, we have no right to decide which groups are allowed to be here, and not even to be here, to exist as a group. That's a very, very far-reaching human rights denial, I must say. To deny the right of a particular group to exist as a group, it's incredible. So, we came up with that definition first in the Rwanda Tribunal, and that definition was then copied by the ICTY, the Yugoslav Tribunal, and it has now today been copied into the ICC, the International Criminal Court. So what I'm saying is that the definition, the judicial definition made by judges of genocide is the one that I just said, denial of the right to exist as a group. And that is still today, I believe, the proper definition of genocide. Genocide can be committed by killing members, yes, of the group, or by exposing them to hardship, so much so that the group will eventually disappear. But it can also be committed by sterilizing the women, by which there would be no more kids coming out of it, or by transferring the kids from their community to other parts of the community. We have had in this country, as you may have heard, genocide questions, because there was a tradition back in the 60s when we would move Greenlandic kids from Greenland and place them into rich families down here in Denmark so as to provide them with a proper education, and they could get university degrees and blah, blah, blah. And when they came back with academic splendor, they had forgotten the songs, they had forgotten the dances, they had forgotten the stories. They couldn't harpoon a seal or put up a fox hunt in the bush. They had forgotten what it means to be a Greenlander. And so that is one way in which you can actually commit genocide. But of course, Denmark was free because Denmark did not have the intent to deny the Greenlanders the right to exist as a group. So I hope this is clear. The second issue is the prosecution of this crime. You can imagine that if you are up as a prosecutor to prove that the accused person had the intent to deny a group the right to exist as a group, then that's very difficult. And it was indeed very difficult even when we settled these cases in The Hague. At one point, I think it was Karadzic, stood up on a podium and slammed his fist on the table and said something like, "We deny the Muslims the right to exist as a group." Baff! That was cut out and shown as an exhibit in the courtroom. And that was one moment where we said, well, apparently, at least some of the Serbs had that intention to deny the Bosniaks the right to exist as an ethnic, national, racial, or religious group in Bosnia. But you can, I mean, just from what I've just said, you can imagine how difficult it is to prove that the perpetrator actually had this special intent. And if you now look at what's happening in Gaza, several speakers have already pointed to that, the ICC is desperately looking for proof that Israeli leaders still have the intent to deny Palestinians the right to exist as a group in Gaza. that is a very, very difficult proof to provide. But I'm sure that the prosecutor must have something in this box of evidence before he could decide to ask for an arrest warrant against Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant. So we don't know yet what sort of proof the prosecutor has in The Hague that Israel can in fact be held accountable for genocide, but he must have some, otherwise he would not have gone so far as to ask for an arrest warrant. And here's my point. When you put a question mark to these investigations to try and dismantle them, such as, for instance, the United States has done by putting sanctions on the ICC, denying the investigators the right to enter the U.S. territory if they want to examine a witness, for instance, and putting other sanctions, economic sanctions, on the ICC. Does the U.S. do that because they firmly believe that the prosecutor, the arrest warrant against Netanyahu and Gallant is just political stuff? Is that what they think? And if it is, then I think it's a blatant contempt against the victims. Those who are dead and they remain in heaven forever. But the victims who sit back with the loss, the pain, and without having with their lives having completely destroyed, if you do not support the investigations into this particular crime, then you are showing fabulous contempt for the victims. And the same thing goes for the president of Hungary. When he invites Netanyahu to come and visit Hungary just a couple of months ago, I mean, as if nothing had taken place, as if there was not an arrest warrant against that gentleman, or these two gentlemen. You know, they have not been found guilty yet, but they have been indicted, or there's an arrest warrant against them for that. So that means that there must be something that the prosecutor has in terms of evidence. So we cannot, at this moment, say that Netanyahu and Gallant and others are guilty of genocide. But what we can say is that there is sufficient evidence against them to support that claim. And it then has to go to, I mean, then we need a trial, and in the end of that trial there will be a judgment either to acquit or to convict. That's the way it should go. And that is why prosecution is so important of these crimes. I think I'll stop here and say hola.
Thank you. Our third panelist is Dr. Viktor Karcic, genocide scholar based in Sarajevo, and I think he will also go to the his speech from up there.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for the invitation, and thanks for organizing this. I'd like to say thank you to the ambassador of Bosnia who is all excellencies here today. For the sake of time, I just want to give a short introduction to the exhibition which I authored, just to give you a sense of why we decided to do it in such a way. In 2015, the UN Security Council had a resolution in Srebrenica that was supposed to be passed. We were hoping it was going to be passed, but there was one guy who raised his hand and vetoed it. That was the Russian ambassador at that time. Of course, this was before the invasion on Ukraine, and this didn't make a lot of headlines worldwide, but this was a lesson to us Bosnians and a message to us Bosnians that even though after all the work the prosecutors did, the investigators did, the judges did, after the thousands of documents they gathered, analyzed, legally wrote down, after the hundreds of hours and thousands of physical evidence which was put into courts after the thousands of witnesses who testified in courts, that all of this was denied by one representative of a strong nation worldwide. It was a message to us that at this moment it was easy and possible to deny court-established facts. And now what I want to say is that when Srebrenica fell, when the enclave fell in 1995, nobody believed this. When I say us, I mean Bosnians. Nobody believed that people were killed. The first news was that the men are somewhere in Serbia. So what we as Bosnians had to do first was to prove that our loved ones exist, firstly. Secondly, that they were killed. Thirdly, we had to exhume them. Fourth, we had to give blood to a DNA analysis to identify them using state-of-the-art methods by DNA analysis. And after all the work we did for the last 30 years, somebody comes and says, no, this isn't genocide. So you can imagine how it is for us Bosnians after 30 years. Because don't believe that in 1995 there weren't people who didn't want to take revenge. There were a lot of people who wanted to get revenge, honestly. If you're a kid who lost a dad, growing up without a dad is a really tough thing. But what we were taught, not only and most importantly by our Islamic community, was that we are going to pursue judicial truth. Because we want the whole world to know what exactly happened to Bosnians. And so we decided to go through that legal truth because we were told that if we do things the right way, everything will be okay. That's exactly what we did. And that's why there wasn't a single act of revenge in Bosnia. And after every genocide, anywhere, worldwide, there are acts of revenge. In Bosnia, that wasn't the case. And I think we don't get too much credit for this, and we should. Because we showed that we are on a higher civilizational level than the people who executed these 8,372 men in 5 days. But honestly, this is a huge logistical nightmare. To execute 8,372 men in 5 days meant that you needed to have more than 8,000 blindfolds, wires. You had to have people who were willing to push the trigger for a long time, for hours. You need to have those bureaucrats sitting down, typing the fuel receipts to be sent. You need to have this local logistical coordinator who would drive from Branjevo to Kozluk to see how things were going on. This is really difficult to do, and this is done in 5 days. So let's not talk about some sort of individuals committing genocide. This is a huge army of 40,000 people, bureaucrats, those secretaries in offices, those people handing out lunch packages, meals, coffees. They knew what was going on. They all knew it. Let's be honest about this. And so after all of that, after we proved that person A sent 500 liters of diesel fuel to person B, after we've proved all of this, we are now in a situation after 30 years that we still have to prove the genocide happened, because somebody somewhere decides to deny this. We're not talking about some lunatics, conspiracy theorists. We're talking about people who last year, including 2 NATO countries and 2 EU countries, Hungary, as it was mentioned, and Slovakia, which vetoed or did not vote for the UN resolution. Not to mention a bunch of other countries. Not because they don't know what happened, but because they decided not to be on the right side of history. So this exhibition right here is a small way to show what exactly happened, how it happened, what were all the phases in it, and what lessons we can learn from this. Because let's not fool ourselves. What happened in Srebrenica and in Bosnia is often told to us that this is your history, your story. No, this is European history. This is a European story because Europeans killed Europeans in Srebrenica. Let's not remember that. This happened 800 kilometers away from Vienna, where people were put in an open air concentration camp, starved to death for years. People died before July 1995. And also when we talk about the intent, I mean, I totally agree, as a lawyer, we need to prove it and so on, but intent doesn't come in and go out as a vacuum. There was an intent for a long time to get rid of the Muslims in eastern Bosnia, in the Drina River Valley. And after committing all these crimes, after burying these people in huge football field-sized mass graves, what happened later on was that, if you remember, Madeleine Albright, she was Secretary of State of the United States, she came out with aerial photographs, and there's one of them there, saying we have evidence that crimes were committed around Srebrenica. She did this, and the State Department did this with the intent that, the Serb army would come out and say, look, we screwed up, you got us red-handed, that's it. It happens, right? What the Bosnian Serb army did never happened in the history of atrocities. They went back, they dug up the mass graves, and they removed it to 30, 40, 50, 70 other secondary mass graves. And so that's why today, the father of Imam Ahmed Hrustanovic, you only find 50% of his skeleton, and a normal human skeleton has 206, 210 bones. They find only 50% because they only found a third of all the mass graves. And that's why every year, as we find more and more mass graves, by accident, by paying the local Serb to tell you information about this, we find a piece of a rib, a piece of a hand, and we have to go back, knock on the door of a mother and tell her, look, this is a piece of a rib of your son, let's rebury this here again. And so this trauma goes on and on and on, and it continues, it will never stop. This traumatic experience of genocide will never stop for the people of Srebrenica. And these were people from 13 different municipalities around Srebrenica. These were people these were Bosniaks of Eastern Bosnia. So when we talk about the importance of this resolution, what we need to do right now is we need to have the Srebrenica genocide in each and every textbook worldwide. We need to have a Srebrenica memorial in every city in the world, from Greenland to Australia, so that denialists who committed these crimes, who used to wear uniforms in 1985 but today are wearing ties and suits in the United Nations, we need to show them that this is part of our history and there's no discussion about what happened. Because we are past that time of discussing and proving and educating. We are now in a situation where we need to say, either you're with us, or you're going to be on the garbage side of history, because this is the right path which we are on. This is the most documented genocide in the history of genocides. I've gone through all the documents in the Hague Tribunal did. I've been doing this for 15 years. This is only, this is, 0.00001% of what is available there. The threshold of evidence which we have on all of this, on all the camps which existed in 1982, is amazing. It's unbelievable. And it's unbelievable that all this, what happened, was denied at that time, but it's also more hurting today that this is still being denied 30 years on. And honestly, we are tired of explaining anymore. We're tired of proving anymore. We need to step up. And we need to have a memorial in every single city in Europe, because this is our story and our history. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Karadzic. Now we turn to our fourth panelist, Mr. Chamil Burakovic. Thank you for joining us. You are one of the survivors of Srebrenica genocide, who reached Tuzla through the death march in July '95. Could you share with us what that journey was like and how you carry those memories with you today?
Thank you. I hope that this microphone works, that everybody hears me. First of all, my role today here is double. Somehow I come here as an official of Bosnia and Herzegovina. I'm the vice president of one of the PH entities, Republika Srpska, and another part is that I am a surviving victim, and the third part is that I used to be an after-war mayor of the city of Srebrenica. So somehow I'm here representing those that are survivors of the genocide. So I legitimately elected official. So I will try somehow to keep my emotions out at some point, and in some points you will see me really emotional. For today, I will start by thanking, first of all, Mr. Anders, if I'm right, for his really touchy, sharing his touchy story, which means to us a lot. And Professor Harhoff, if I'm right, it's a great point about genocide as a crime, because we have a huge problem back in Bosnia trying to prove what genocide is, because everybody is commenting, criticizing, and we have that, let's say, battles, political battles, fighting what genocide is and what isn't. And I think that is the most, I wrote that down and I will repeat that in every chance that I get. So thank you very much for that. And then the tireless Hikmet, a friend of mine, a young person from Bosnia that is tireless trying to prove what he was talking about really emotionally. Somehow he's connected with us, he's present in Srebrenica at the Memorial Center, he helped a lot. And our battle is going on and we will never stop. So also thank the tireless ambassador of Bosnia in this country. I want to thank you personally for inviting me here, or distinguished members of Riyaset of Islamska Zajednica, or both muftis here and everybody else that I see, dear people from Srebrenica that I see here, and others, international diplomatic corps. Thank you all. Thank you all. It means a lot to us. So I will try to go back a little bit and share my personal story. I was 16 years old back in 1995. Either I was lucky or not that I lived by myself in that time, because when war began, or aggression began on our country, we lived in that eastern part, which is on the border with Serbia, so we were the first one to be attacked, actually. And at the beginning, I was with my parents. By the time when UN officially entered Srebrenica back in April 1993, and the time that Mr. Anders was talking about, then there was a war school established under the UN protected zone in Srebrenica. So I was then 14 years old, and I stayed to attend the war school, to continue what I've lost for 1 year since the war started. My parents and my middle brother went to the village called Luka, where my father and my mother are from, because it was a hunger. It was a really, really hard time of hunger, where my parents had to go back to the village, even if we lived in the city, to provide and go back to agriculture in order to survive, because it was a hunger. So I stayed by myself, and I lived with my grandmother together. And for me, the time from 1993 to 1995 was a time when I was a kid who thought that the war has stopped for us, because the great general, if you can call him such, but his message to us in that time from the roof of the post building in Srebrenica was that you are safe now. I'm looking at that guy right now. It's been 30 years, 32 years, but for me that was, I trusted him. That it was a huge lie. So we relaxed. We lived this short time in a war where, like, actually daily killings, shelling of the downtown and everything. So that's a war. So we got used to it somehow for 1 year. But that time was something that tricked us a lot, and that I'm regretting some of the belief that we had in the international community. I'm sorry to all of you, but that's how we felt. We were thinking that we are safe. So yeah, I went to school, I lived normally. There were no shelling anymore, no detonations that we could hear, no shotguns. So it was kind of peaceful. Our army was demilitarized, so we couldn't see any more of army on the streets and etc. So that's how we lived. And then a few days before July, we heard these rumors around that something is going on around Srebrenica. My uncle lived across my house, and my other uncle lived right from my house, like few houses on the right side. So As a kid, I couldn't decide on my own. I mean, I was 16. I went to my older uncle called Ralph, and I asked him, like, what do I do? He was looking at me. He was kind of sad. He said, he cursed me because I was his obligation now. He goes like, I wish that you were back, your parents were here, so I don't have to think of you and two of my sons. So I went to another uncle to see what he will do, and he said that him and his son will surrender down to Potocari, to the UN camp. And my older uncle was, that I look alike, and today my mother and everybody calls me that I look alike, and Mufti Hasanovic knows my uncle Reuf. He goes, no, we go through the woods to Tuzla. So I was kind of closer to him. So then also I had a hard decision to decide. Either I go to surrender or I go through the mountains. I decided to go with my older uncle Reuf and two of his sons, Alia and Asim. And those 6 days and 6 nights for me are the hell, living hell, and something that I've never distanced from me. I mean, I do work today, officially, I try to stay neutral as much as I can, but sometimes you just the way you are, and you cannot forget some of the things. So those 3 days that I was with them, out of 6 that I was by myself, other 3 days, they were all 3 of them were killed in the first 3 days. So I stayed alone for the rest of my journey throughout the woods. Lucky or not lucky is this point. I think I was lucky to be by myself because I've seen a lot of other people that stay because of their family member. Let's say, I've seen a father hugging a wounded son, and he wouldn't continue without his son, and he couldn't carry a son, and he stayed and he was captured or either killed with his son, or vice versa. I've seen sons with fathers, I've seen brothers with brothers. So I was lucky to be on my own, pretty young, not too young not to know, but also old enough to actually fight and move forward, but also young to make smart decisions in the moment. So my decision was just to move forward, and I didn't know anybody around me. I just see people. There was 13,000 of us that started that journey from Srebrenica, and I was just pushing forward. And somehow it's just a destiny. I can't explain. Like the fact that I will tell you today is that my pre-war class, the 7th grade of elementary school, we had 38 boys in that classroom and let's say 20 girls. All I know that 4 people are living today. 3 of them are Serbs, 1 Bosniak, and myself. So all others from my class, pre-war class, were killed. Most of them my age that started that journey through the woods. I think out of 13,000, maybe 5 survived that were my age, and none that surrendered to Potocari. I didn't know anybody, maybe 1 or 2, maybe smaller, physically smaller people that could trick Serbian forces to let them go because they were thinking they're kids. But no my age kid, 16 years old, survived who surrendered to Potocari, nor did they survive in larger number who went through the woods. So I was double lucky for other people to just survive that journey. For me, it's a miracle. And for others that know what I've survived. So that journey was 6 days, and I survived the 6th day, the first group that survived, and it was, when they counted us, it was around 3,000 out of 10,000 that were behind us. Maybe months after that, other people were coming out. Others were in Potocari, most of men and boys were killed. And I hear in your statements when somebody is, like let's say the host, and when you say men and boys, no, women were killed too in genocide in Srebrenica. Catholics were killed too, not only Bosniaks. We have Catholics, we have Romas, we have women, we have children, and we have elderlies and the men. So everybody was killed who was on the way of the Serbian forces. So my journey lasted for 6 days. I told you I came out in the first group. When I came out to tell you details of my trip, I wrote a book about that. So this time is not enough for me to tell you all, but I try to, what touches me still today. When I got out to the safe territory of Tuzla, actually, Nezuk, I was laying down and I've seen Dr. Pilau, who was attending last night's event in this other city here. He was the first person that I could recognize. And I was laying down and watching people coming out. And out of 3,000 people that came out that day, I couldn't recognize much of the people. The first thing that I thought of myself is, why did I survive? Like, I didn't see anybody that I know. That's how I felt as a kid, trying to see anybody that I know. And I couldn't recognize many people because they were from many different, as Hikmet said, that people killed in genocide in Srebrenica were not only from Srebrenica, from other places. So that was the time when I came out alone. I didn't know the destiny of my parents, my father, my brother, my third brother that was in Tuzla as a wounded soldier transferred in 1993 with the UN helicopters. Somehow we all connected. My father and my middle brother were captured, kept in concentration camp. As POWs, they went to the United States. We reconnected in 1995. I went to the States. I went to high school, graduated, mastered, and I returned in 2005 and still living in Srebrenica today. So that was somehow my destiny to survive, probably to tell the story even here in Copenhagen today.
Thank you.
For inviting me.
Thank you. I thank all our panelists for sharing their expertise, experiences, and voices. And now I'd like to open the discussion to the audience for a Q&A session for the next 15 minutes, and you are all warmly invited to ask questions and engage with our speakers. Yes, we have a question from...
Can you hear me? First of all, I would like to thank all participants in this distinguished panel. Anas, thank you for your really open self-reflecting on the role of you and the international community back in the 90s. Frederick, thank you very much for all the work you have done to helping us promoting the truth and also putting the words, the legal framework around it, and also to my Bosnian fellows on surviving and fighting for the truth every single day. As you can hear from my voice, I'm also from Srebrenica, but I'm living in Denmark. And my question is actually a reflection to your, Frederick, your definition of genocide is following. If the definition of genocide is preventing a group to exist, does it mean that denial of genocide is actually continuance of that policy? How come that we have official government in our neighboring country that is still denying the genocide in Srebrenica openly? There is something profoundly wrong in the war crime that are actually walking around free and not being captured. So how do you, not only you, but the international community, do expect from us to believe in the justice? And what does it mean that denial of the genocide will actually is continuance of the denying Chama's right to exist in Srebrenica territory? Thank you.
For your question, you are raising a point about accepting guilt, which is obviously something that is very, very difficult, even for most of us, I suppose. But if a whole nation denies any wrongdoing and denies the facts as they have been proven in the judicial context of proceedings, then I think we are up against something much more serious. That is a continuation of the denial of the right for a group to exist as a group. And it is born out of dreams about the right to glory. You see it in Russia these days, in Ukraine. I often wonder about why is Russia waging this war in Ukraine? What do they want? Well, they think they have the right to own Ukraine. And out of dreams of magnificence or I don't know what, they feel that they're entitled to just take Ukraine, and because it's always belonged to Russia, and so what's the problem? And it's so difficult to understand, because it was not more than 10 years ago, way back in 1990, when Russia actually accepted Ukraine as a new independent country in the United Nations. So they have already recognized the sovereignty of Ukraine. Yet, 20, 30 years later, they say, no. Ukraine still belongs to us. And if that is what you believe, then it is probably very easy to refuse guilt. I don't know if this is an answer.
Yes, we have a question in the second row.
Thank you very much. My name is Adam Petr. I'm a former Hungarian diplomat, served in Sarajevo, and later was living in the Balkans. But I left a decade ago, so, well, not because, but it's not unrelatedly, because of the fact that twice Hungary was mentioned in negative context. So, but that's life. My question to the professor would be, because I want to use the opportunity to ask someone who worked at ICTY, because when I was dealing with the Balkans, in my career, I thought that, it's a wonderful institution which will bring reconciliation. And also, what wonderful, that's one issue, and then I didn't feel really about it. So I just wanted you to reflect, maybe was it a wrong goal, it wasn't the wrong concept of understanding. And the second fact was my fact that when I looked on the support to Bosnia, there was always this line ICTY. And it's a lot of millions. And actually, I was trying to Google, I think it was $700 million or euros was the whole cost of ICTY. I understand that, justice costs money, yeah. But at the same time, I remember how much maybe this money could have been used better in Bosnia. So I'm not sure. I just wanted to reflect to how you felt from it. But I said, Bosnia needs for development, reconstruction money. And then I looked, we give this money, yes, but actually this money goes to the tribunal. So Bosnia doesn't get that money, but it's actually on accounts that it's support to Bosnia. So and I always felt, is this the right way to do it, Because again, it's not criticizing, I just wanted to finally ask someone who was in it and get also kind of a reflection. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your question. Well, truth comes at a cost. And yes, I know that we were extremely expensive. We had very good salaries, indeed, enjoyed life. And for sure, we could have been more careful with the budgets. And as you may know, both tribunals, the ICTR in Rwanda and in Yugoslavia, were closed down because of protests from, among other countries, Russia, because they said we cannot continue to pay for this, it's much too costly. So yes, but on the other hand, think of what you got. The investigations that were made in the former Yugoslavia, where you have these investigative teams who really risk their lives in running around and looking for evidence. We have, many of them were friends of mine, and I still know many of them, and they went through terrible, terrible experiences looking for evidence, being threatened by both sides, basically. So I think it was important also to ensure that these investigations took place. They were made by teams, 6, 7, 8 experienced policemen in each team, and then they would go to a particular place where there was a massacre and they started looking for evidence. And they were there normally 3, 4 weeks at a time, and then they had to go home, and then they would come back. But yes, justice comes at a cost, and it is expensive. And your first question was?
The reconciliation.
Yes.
About that.
Wow. I have given a lot of thought to reconciliation because what a criminal trial does is that it collects evidence and confronts the accused with this evidence and ends up either acquitting or convicting the accused. And all the witnesses, the victims that are brought to testify during this criminal trial, they come in as witnesses and they are asked to give their testimony, to explain to the judges what they have experienced and so forth, and then they're asked to leave the courtroom. There is no communication between prosecutors and defendants, and no communication between us judges and the accused. So it is very difficult to have any sort of reconciliation coming out of a criminal trial. Trials are, per definition, confrontative. You know, it's A versus B, and there is no room for dialogue. And so we really regretted that when we sat as judges in the ICTY, and we often thought about, isn't there a way in which we can try and facilitate communication, a dialogue between the perpetrator and the victim? We saw it in South Africa, these, what do you call it, TRCs, Truth and Reconciliation Commissions. They were exemplary because they allowed the victims to be confronted with the perpetrator. And so the perpetrator really wanted to apologize to the victims. I'm sorry for what I did. What did you do? Well, I can't explain, or maybe I would explain, but in any case, I feel really, I regret what I did. And for the victims, you know what they were looking after? They were looking for information about what did my husband do or say when he was killed. Because they need to know the circumstances under which their loved ones were killed or raped or whatever happened. And so arranging for these dialogues allows the victims to, shall I cut down? Okay, I'm sorry. Allows the victims to get the information that they so desperately need. So because I see that we're short of time, so I'll stop here, but thank you very much.
As we come to the close of today's program, I want to thank each one of you. One more, okay, we go to one more question. The last question.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the very heartfelt debate and your speeches. I think just before we end, I would like to propose maybe a short moment of silence to remember the victims and honor them, but also remember from what I've learned today, it's very important that we commit and make the commitment that this never happens again anywhere in the world, especially what we see today. My name is Samar. I'm also a politician here in Denmark, so I'm really touched by the words I've heard today, and I think it's very important that we convey this message to as many people as possible. Thank you very much.
Yes. Let us all rise for a minute of silence. And thank you, each one of you, our organizers, speakers, participants, and the audience for being part of this important moment of reflection and remembrance. And as we reflect on what we've had today and on the world we live in right now, which is still marked by violence, conflict, and division, the memory of Srebrenica reminds us of the urgency behind the words "never again." It has to be something we mean. So let this gathering be more than a remembrance. Let it be a reminder that remembrance is not passive, it is an active commitment. And my microphone is playing up. To stand up against hate and to speak truth even when it is inconvenient. To defend human dignity wherever it is threatened. Before you leave, I would like to invite you to take a moment to revisit the exhibition that you encountered upon your arrival, which is also available online, remember.ba, or through QR codes. The exhibition is titled Genocide in Srebrenica, 11 Lessons for the Future. It is a part of the wider project. The author of the exhibition, Dr. Karcic, he is with us today. He is available to guide you through the exhibition and answer any questions that you may have. Thank you for your presence, your questions, and your care, and may we carry the lessons of Srebrenica with us, not only today, but every day.
You already said something about this definition of genocide and how to have a stance to the genocides right now.
The core of the crime of genocide is denying the right of a group, an ethnic, national, racial, or religious group, the right to exist as a group. So what the perpetrators want to do is they want to dissolve the group, make the group go away. They don't want to have the group visible in the streets. They deny this group the right to exist as a group. And so basically the protected object of the crime of genocide is, first of all, the group as such. It's not necessarily the individuals, but those who commit genocide do it because they want the group to fall apart, to go away, to disappear, because they think that the group does not have the right to exist as a group. That's a very basic human rights consideration. So if you deny a group the right to exist as a group, then who are you to order that? I mean, this is something that we can leave to the gods, but this is not something that humans can decide which groups have the right to exist here and which groups do not have the right to exist. So that is really the core of the crime of genocide. You can commit genocide in various ways. You can kill the members of the group, that's fine, then the group will eventually fall away. But you can also, for instance, transfer the children. That's one of the ways in which you can commit genocide, that the act of genocide can be committed by taking all the kids or the children out of the group, put them elsewhere and let them grow up. And so when they come back, if they ever come back, then they have forgotten the culture, the language, the history, the traditions of the group, and so the group will eventually cease to exist. And so what I'm saying is that you can commit genocide in various ways. You can kill all the members of the group, but you don't even have to do that. You can just make sure that the group no longer can continue to exist as a group. It is the coherence between the members of the group that you really want to destroy. If you are a member of the group, then the perpetrator of genocide wants you to forget that you are a member of this group, because the group no longer exists. You can live on happily and eat and sleep, but you must not no longer feel that you are a member of the group. The membership of the group is what I want to take away from you if I'm committing genocide.
How do you see this systematically denying genocide in Srebrenica from some politicians in Bosnia?
Well, they would say, yes, it's true that we wanted to get the Bosnians out of Bosnia, But that was not genocide. That was just ordinary ethnic cleansing or crimes against humanity, which is also a very serious crime. But somehow it is not as serious as genocide, because, as I said, genocide is about who has the right to exist as a group, and that is something that we humans really cannot do. That's why we call genocide the mother of all crimes. Then you have ordinary crimes, such as ethnic cleansing and attacks against civilians. These are war crimes and crimes against humanity. They can also be prosecuted, and you can put people in prison for that for the rest of their lives. It's a very serious crime, ethnic cleansing. So some of those who deny genocide, they say, well, yes, we killed a number of people, but that wasn't genocide. That was just ordinary ethnic cleansing. And that we had to do for political reasons. So you have to be very clear about what is it that people are saying about their own role in the killings.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Hvala vam što ste danas sa nama u Kopenhagenu. Današnji dan je posebno značajan jer obilježavamo 30 godina od genocida u Srebrenici, koji svi znamo desio se 11. jula 1995. kada je preko 8.372 bošnjačka muškarca i dječaka ubijena. Zašto smo organizovali ovo na ovaj način u vidu panel diskusije danas u Kopenhagenu? Zato što je bitno da međunarodna zajednica zna i sagleda težinu onoga što je učinjeno. Bitno je da ljudi i nakon 30 godina i pogotovo nakon usvojene UN-ove rezolucije o proglašenju 11. jula danom sjećanja, Međunarodnog dana sjećanja, znaju i pamte i ne zaborave šta se desilo u Srebrenici. Kao što je danas bilo rečeno, to je dio Evrope i uvijek će biti dio Evrope. Mi smo Evropljani i kao takvi ne smijemo dozvoliti da ljudi zaborave ili da jednostavno stave taj dan ili tu rezoluciju u neku fioku usvojenu i kažu to je to. Ne, to nije to. Ne smijemo zaboraviti ni šta se desilo u Drugom svjetskom ratu, na određeni način jesmo, pa se ponovilo ne samo 1995. u Srebrenici, nego i prije toga u mnogim drugim bosansko-hercegovačkim gradovima isto to zlo. Znači, Srebrenicu uvijek navodim kao primjer gnusnog zločina genocida. Čuli smo danas od profesora Harhofa definiciju genocida, znači namjera, to je namjera da se narod izbriše, uništi. Namjera je bila dokazana. Mislim da je sasvim jasno koju poruku želimo poslati. To je poruka, neki kažu vi se želite svetiti. Ne, mi se ne želimo svetiti. Mi želimo poslati poruku mira, pomirenja, ali isto tako i pamćenja. Mi pamtimo šta se desilo zbog generacija koje dolaze, i ne samo zbog Bosanaca i Hercegovaca, nego i zbog međunarodne zajednice, zbog svih naših prijatelja, zbog toga što je na taj način spriječavamo zaborav i čuvamo kulturu sjećanja.